Good money drives bad out of circulation. Roosevelt wanted to greatly expand the role of government in the American economy. He believed, for some reason, that the big thinkers would do a better job of healing the excesses in the economy than individual people. I'll leave that aside. He knew that given the greatly increased level of public expenditure and the inability of the citizenry to pay for it on a current basis, that anybody who could add or subtract would sell US dollars in favor of gold. He couldn't stand the competition. And so, very simply, rather than try to convince the citizenry of the future of the country and the efficacy of the currency, it was more convenient for him to coerce.
I do think that a default winner is gold. It is one of the only, if not the only, financial asset that is both a medium of exchange, which is to say a money, but also an asset in and of itself, rather than being a promise to pay. The renminbi, the dollar, the ruble are all really, in the end, promises to pay. But gold is in effect payment in and of itself. So I do believe that gold's prominence as a medium of exchange will increase as a consequence of unstable geopolitics, and increase too inadvertently because of the US government's decision to weaponize the US dollar and weaponize the SWIFT system.
This is an important point for many people to understand about silver and gold. I bought that Krugerrand in Hong Kong in 1974. I had to smuggle it in. You know, they made me smuggle it in because it was confiscated, I think in 33 or something. And today, because of what Nixon did and the Fed and all this stuff, and I think that's why the why is, why you'd better start buying some gold and silver or uranium or copper, getting into things that what Jim Rickards called things that last.
Our government has decided to weaponize our currency and our payments mechanism, taking advantage of the fact that the world is on a dollar standard to attempt to enforce American policy extraterritorially. Whether or not you agree with the direction of US policy, I think there is no doubt that there are a lot of countries and a lot of people around the world that don't appreciate the extraterritorial nature of US policy, and thus don't trust the US government and the US government's proxy, which is to say the US dollar. The consequence of that is that I think gold will play an increasingly important role, or perhaps you should say resume an increasingly important role in global trade. I don't believe that that leads any country to a gold standard.
Good money drives bad out of circulation. Roosevelt wanted to greatly expand the role of government in the American economy. He believed, for some reason, that the big thinkers would do a better job of healing the excesses in the economy than individual people. I'll leave that aside. He knew that given the greatly increased level of public expenditure and the inability of the citizenry to pay for it on a current basis, that anybody who could add or subtract would sell US dollars in favor of gold. He couldn't stand the competition. And so, very simply, rather than try to convince the citizenry of the future of the country and the efficacy of the currency, it was more convenient for him to coerce. Governments have a monopoly on force and violence. And so you need to understand that at its most basic, government is about coercion. Mr. Roosevelt knew for sure that he couldn't convince people to allocate money politically away from their family to somebody else's family. And the only way that he could do it was to coerce them. Chairman Mao, describing politics, famously said that all political power ultimately flows from the barrel of a gun.
People become politicians because of a lust for power and a belief that their own policy alternatives are better than other people's policy alternatives, a gold standard is always a limit to a political system's power and a politician's power. So if you are a politician, the idea that your fiscal policy should be held hostage to gold is, to you, a circumstance to be avoided at all cost. The idea, as an example, that Mr. Putin, were he on a gold standard, would be unable to affect fiscal policy in rubles, but rather would be tied to the flow of gold, or the idea, for that matter, that Mr. Xi or Mr. Biden would voluntarily allow themselves to be constrained in that fashion by the, quote, barbarous relic, seems highly unlikely to me.
My crystal ball is cracked and cloudy. I know that we've come off a 40-year period that has been as benign as any 40-year period in human history. And I believe that some of the benefits that we saw over the last 40 years, globalization and free trade, the demographics of the baby boom, technology, but particularly declining real interest rates, are over. I know that as the world becomes more political, as people begin to believe that the allocation of utility in society should occur by government rather than by delivering utility to the customer, that the world will become more political and hence more hostile. People will come to believe that other people owe them something, irrespective of the utility that they've delivered. And that's not a recipe for peace. I don't know where or how that will manifest itself. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope it doesn't manifest itself. But separate and apart from the macro, the simple arithmetic around the fact that the political equation around quantitative easing, debt and deficits, and negative real interest rates is broken. It tells me that I can't rely on other people. I can't rely on the big thinkers. I can't rely on the government. While I don't know how the disruption will manifest itself, and I hope it doesn't until I shed my mortal coil, it isn't the way that I'm prepared to bet. It just isn't the way that I'm prepared to bet.
Everybody wants to wait until the price moves. When it moves this time, you might not be able to get any. I mean, he's serious about it. And since that we're in the mining and gold and silver industry, we know the supplies are short. And there's so much money sitting out there ready to move. But today, silver's about $25 an ounce. It's 25 off its all-time high of 50. And gold's around 1,900, estimated to go around 2,800. So I'll wait till it goes to 2,800. You gotta be nuts.